Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So, Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Heavenly Christmas Tree, which he wrote in 1876, is about a young boy living in poverty. Very bleak, very depressing story. His mother, his relatives are dying from hunger and sickness, and it describes this cold, dreary world, that he pretty much lives in every day. That's all he's ever known, and even there's even little details, these little touches that he adds, and even at the beginning, where he's amusing himself while he's sitting down in the cold basement when he wakes up, and watching the condensation of his own breath, and it's in the dead of winter. And then later on, when dusk comes and the evening comes, he decides to take a little walk, a little journey around his neighborhood. First, he's looking at the poor neighborhood, and he sees this pack of dogs howling, really intense scene. And then later on, he looks at all the wealthier, happy families, and all enjoying themselves. And he feels this, of course, this torment, this longing, this sadness. A woman from one of these families sneaks him a kopeck, which is of course an incredible gesture. It's a generous gesture on her part. And then later on, he looks through the window of this shop, and he sees these dolls suddenly come to life. They're all dancing and singing, celebrating Christmas. One is playing a violin. And then he wakes up and realizes that it was all a dream. And then he dies, finally. Which I guess in some sense it puts him out of his misery, but of course it's tragic, it's horrible. He goes to heaven and unites with Jesus and all of his relatives, his mother who's died, who's passed away. All of these, Dostoevsky even points out that the sinners and the sinners go to heaven. Everybody goes to heaven regardless of what they've done, and that's the ending. And this is something that I haven't really thought about for a while, but there has been sort of a shift, I think, in my own paradigm or my own perspective, I would say, on this whole concept of heaven. And I think that this story certainly has touched on that for me. It's like I used to see either the image of heaven or see the idea of heaven as had this sort of sickly sweet kind of trite feeling whenever I look at it. I always thought it was incredibly unimaginative, that it was stuffy. I don't even think the word Stepford would really be strong enough of a word for it. But then I started to, when I looked at the metaphor of heaven more closely, and particularly when I come across stories like this, I think it gave it a certain kind of richness that I haven't really seen before, and particularly in other kinds of depictions of it. And I think one of the things that I really did not expect is that feeling of rebellion, actually, when you read about heaven in this story, because it's not like, I guess, what Satan says in Paradise Lost, where it's like where you reign in hell but you serve in heaven. It's more of a feeling. You almost feel a little bit more like, when you read this story in particular, like you're Eve tasting the forbidden fruit. And the reason why I say that is because Dostoevsky was not only speaking up against poverty, but the implications of that are, as it always boils down to, the imperialism and the inequalities that were creating that poverty. And he was giving this feeling of hope, this sense of freedom for a lot of the children who were living in these very poor conditions. So in a sense, he's actually, it's like he's giving the characters, symbolically, he's giving them a back door, and saying and showing them an alternative reality that's much greater, that's much better. And I remember even at the scene at the very end, it's that sort of fieriness, that sort of I would say it's more of a cross between sweetness and fieriness, I think, in the atmosphere of it. And I think that is also what I think is very original, and I think what a lot of other writers would have probably struggled to be able to illustrate. So there's nothing trite about it, and it's also, I would say, a very palpable world that he's created. It made a very, I think, a very strong impression on me. So I would highly recommend this story.